And when you find out how wrong you are, what you do is pivot. And pivot means you change direction, but not entirely. So, you know, you put one foot here and you think, here's where I'm going, and you find out I'm wrong, so you just go, oops, I'm over here. Because you're not entirely wrong, probably. If you find out you're entirely wrong, and you should get out of this business, close it down, and go do something else, congratulations, because you probably found it out a lot quicker and a lot cheaper than you would have some other ways. I've done that myself too. But normally you'll find out that you can pivot. And when you pivot, you say, well, wait a minute, this wasn't really right here, but parts of it were right, so maybe we'll do this. Maybe we'll price it this way. Maybe we'll package it like this. Maybe we'll throw out half of these features and add a couple different features that we hadn't thought about. Or maybe the features we thought were going to be in version 5 should really be in version 1. And that's pivoting. And then when you've pivoted, you go back up here and you say, now we have a whole lot of new things that we know for sure. And you go through the cycle again until you've got a product and market fit. And I'm having trouble with my glasses, so reading here. This is a rigorous process. This isn't something you do by the seat of your pants. Getting inspired to start your company is what you do by the seat of your pants. There's a guy who wrote a book on the life cycle of different companies, and he said, excuse me, he said, companies like children are conceived in passion, which is true. But you can't run them that way. Any of you have children, you know you can't run your family with the same passion that your children were conceived with, at least not successfully. And it takes rigor and it takes discipline. And Eric Ries, who is also one of the proponents of customer development, said this. He's an entrepreneur from ImView, which is a company that I think makes avatars out of yourself, and then you can do some kind of instant messaging with these avatars. I don't get it. But he gets it, and he makes a lot of money doing it. He says, great entrepreneurs don't have better ideas, they have better process. Because a lot of our ideas are great, and a lot of our ideas are not great, and everybody's got ideas, and boy, as an investor, I see this a lot. People who have a great idea think, well, I have this great idea, you should give me lots of money. And I say, well, when was the last time you saw somebody make something and you go, I had that idea, I could have thought of that, I did think of that. Haven't we all had that experience? There were probably 1,000 people thought of it. But that one person did something about it. That's why they get the money, not because of the ideas. So you have to weed out which ideas work, which ideas don't work, and it takes the process to do that. Customer development, there's 4 stages of this. Customer discovery is the first one, which is where you write down what you think. This is the 4 steps that I showed you before. But the goal of customer discovery is just to find out who the customers are, what they want to buy, what they're willing to pay for it, what they feel their problem is. Does your product solve their problem? What kind of product would it be that would solve their problem? How much will they pay? What does a day in your customer's life look like before they got your product and after they got your product? That's the kind of research that you're doing in customer discovery. And once you start doing that research and the answers start looking the same again and again and again, you can say, okay, we've got a fit now between what my product is, even if I haven't built it yet, and what the customers want, what the market is. At that point, you can move on to customer validation. Customer validation is where you're figuring out what the sales process is like. At that stage, you're developing a roadmap for how customers buy. Who are the influencers? You're starting to learn the language that they talk about return on investment. You're starting to learn what they're willing to pay, what their sales process is, what the lifetime value of a customer would be to your company, what your average selling price should be. All these are pieces now that you're putting together of your business model. And during the customer validation process, you'll actually come up with some orders. Because if people aren't willing to pay, then you're not doing it right. So you keep cycling through this till somebody says, yes, I'll buy that. Here's my money. And you have some orders. And then you move into what they call the customer creation stage, which comes after you've proven how to sell. And that's where you cross the chasm. Anybody read the book Crossing the Chasm for high-tech entrepreneurs? Mostly for high-tech. It talks about the different kinds of customers that buy in the life cycle of a tech product. And the first ones are early adopters. And those are pretty much the ones you're going to run into here and the ones that are going to buy here. But when you've scaled up a selling methodology to move into the early mainstream, the pragmatists, they call them, the early majority, now you're into the customer creation stage, and you can start scaling your company up to build a big one. And then the next phase is where the company scales, and that's that circle that I showed you before with all the departments. Now we can start really scaling the company because we have a product that fits with the market, we have a way of selling, we have a way of creating customers in a bigger space that not just, you know, my mom and my friends and a couple of early adopters. And now we can start scaling this up. The dirty little secret for investable companies, and particularly when the venture capitals are involved, there's usually a management change between here and here. Because usually the people who are good at doing this aren't really good at doing this. And it takes a different kind of skill set. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be painful if people are caught unawares about that. And the cycle never really stops because customers change, the market changes, competition changes, so you've always got to be putting a little bit of effort back into these kinds of things. And if you look at big successful companies, they've done this. They may not have called it customer development, but they've done this over time, and when they launch new branches of new brands, rather, they do this, and then launch into new markets, they do that. What's unusual is that this has not been typically applied to startups in the past. Most startups think my job is to make a product and then figure out how to sell it, rather than how to develop customers in concert with my product so that then we can scale through these pieces. So if you have a known business model, just to sum up, your goal is to scale to exploit. And you start, what I recommend generally is you start with your goals, follow up with metrics, grow in cycles so that all the pieces stay in sync, and exploit that business model. The external pieces are going to be your exoskeleton, whether you're the lobster or the whale. That's a function of the customer situation. You know, those 4 gas stations that I showed you, the oil companies are in a business model where they can be the whale. But the owners of those individual gas stations, they're only going to be lobsters. Because there's not enough people that want to drive to your mobile station, even if you have a convenience store, where you can't scale past a certain point. But within that point, you can be very profitable if you know how to do this part relative to that part. If you don't know your business model, then start with customer development. And this is the 4 steps to it. This is an image from a book that I'll give you a resource to in a little bit. And if I could leave you with one thing today, it would be this. The job of a mature business is to scale, but the job of a startup is to discover the business model, not to start scaling before you've done this. Before we get to questions, and I have handouts of some of the points here and some resources for you. But before we do that, hang on a sec. Remember this guy? I'm actually writing a book. It's going to be an e-book called The Many Hats of an Entrepreneur. And if anybody would like to win a copy, I would have a drawing. It hasn't come out yet, but I promise it will by the end of the year. Get your business card. I'll take a drawing. And I'd like you to do two things. On the back of your business card, before you hand it in, if you would like me to contact you about a free consultation about your business model, write yes, and I will contact you. And if you don't, write no, and I won't contact you. So write that on the back of your business card, and we'll pass that around.
You said two things.
Yes or no?
Oh, okay.
Sorry. And I'm not sure I have enough of these, but pass these out. There's two sheets. Take one of each, going in different directions. And if anybody, if we run out, let me know and I'll email you some when I get back.
And we have this thing called a Xerox machine.
Yes, we do. You do. You can Xerox them. So I've heard. Pass that around and we'll...
They now have color.
They now have color, right? And Charlie's not here, so I need a volunteer to do the drawing. Pass the card box around so we can